So we had the birth of the pill, and I am Jennifer Leon. So in 1950, Margaret Sanger met Gregory Pincus to talk to him about creating a magic pill that helps women not get pregnant. This talk started to bring up questions about Sigmund Freud and how he helped change the idea of sex for America. So instead of just for reproduction, probably for pleasure as well. Patincus ends up getting funding to start testing rabbits and rats, and ended up having success with the rabbits, where he put progesterone into the rabbits' food and feeding them, and it actually ended up stopping ovulation for about a month. And then Margaret Sanger, life was actually fairly crazy, so she ended up having 3 husbands and 3 kids, even though with the kids, that didn't stop her for trying to find a solution for pregnancies. So she ended up getting in trouble with the law, so she fled to Europe, and then only came back to America to help her daughter as she suffered from pneumonia and eventually passed away. And then after that, she remarried and then ended up finding Planned Parenthood.
My name is Alexandra, and Catherine McCormick is then introduced, and she plays a huge role in the making of the pill because she donated to both Planned Parenthood and towards the making of the pill as well. Pincus starts to have doubts on whether the pill would work or not because he had no clue if there would be major side effects. So this is when John Rock gets involved, and they both test out how progesterone and estrogen would work in women. Then they start to they run their first test on humans, and both the pill is supported by the feminist movement and the eugenics movement.
Hi, I'm Adia. By 1949, Sanger is increasingly becoming worse in health and getting really sick. But that did not stop her. She ended up becoming the sole president of the International Planned Parenthood Federation. And even after doctors telling her to stop and to retire, she decided that was not going to happen. Pincus was very optimistic about his pill. He was so optimistic that he ended up buying 19 shares of the sole stock, not even knowing if that was actually going to work. And he was only really worried about if he had enough test subjects to make sure to even think about if his employees were taken care of. In the end, Pincus had one of the most controversial field trials in the history of this Planned Parenthood.
Hello, my name's Kiera. As for my section, we talked about the research that Pincus did in Puerto Rico, which is what made his research so controversial because he basically worked with people in the lower income bracket. There was resistance from the Catholic Church because they didn't want anyone interfering with the natural bodily functions of reproduction, and they did not see sex as for pleasure, but solely to reproduce. Pincus also took the time to modify his pill because he accidentally had estrogen in one of the dosages and sent out progesterone-only pills only to realize that caused more side effects. So he actually modified the pill to include estrogen and progesterone. This modification made him more likely to be approved by the FDA, which he actually got approved for Enave, which was the first birth control pill. However, he did not sell it or market it as a contraceptive. Instead, he marketed it as a menstrual disorder medication.
Hi, my name is Samantha. Once the pill was approved by the FDA for menstrual cycles, the next step for the Stoll company, who headed the Envoy drug, was to ask the FDA to approve it for use for contraception and for birth control. It was unlike any other drug because it was not for a disease or to prevent. It was to prevent a biological process, which made it much harder to approve. They also had no long-term study to determine any long-term side effects. The Stoll company had no desire to have Sanger or Pincus as their spokesman, but John Rock became the perfect spokesman for them. He was handsome, male, and he was Catholic. So Pascal de Felice was placed on Envoy's FDA case, and he was hesitant for the reasons that we talked about. So he extended and actually does his own research, asking doctors if they think the pill should be approved. Out of the 61 OBGYNs he contacted, only 26 recommended the drug. But the doctors and de Felice realized that the side effects for many on having a pregnancy or an abortion were much worse than anything that could come from the birth control pill. So in 1960, the FDA approves it. It limited its use to 2 years, but later it would approve smaller doses and extend it for longer periods of time, as we know. The book concludes talking about how our main characters, or people in real life, continue their careers. Rock hoped to lead the crusade for the Catholic Church to accept the pill. As we know, that wasn't really a successful crusade in terms of the Pope, but many Catholics today are open to birth control. Sanger continued the campaign for women's rights. Pincus would dedicate his life to researching the birth control pill, and McCormick would fund women's dormitories at colleges. Okay, so we're going to begin with a discussion about the book, and the first thing we're going to talk about are our critiques. We have two major critiques of the book, and the first was we felt that the author kind of skimmed over Sanger's involvement with the eugenics movement. It kind of mentioned more so Sanger using the eugenics movement for her own benefit, and it did include quotes such as this one, Sanger saying, "We need to do something definite about the breeding and multiplication of diseased families, including the mental defectives, moron, unhealthy, and diseased people." So that kind of reflects on this dual character of Sanger. But overall, we felt that the author could have been a little bit more critical of this aspect of the history, instead of, we felt it was a little bit skimmed over in the book. And our second criticism
is that the author did a very poor job of explaining the ethics and the criticism behind doing research in Puerto Rico. They specifically targeted women in the poor demographic that had 11 children and really they couldn't afford to have another child, and they physically didn't want to have another one. And so they didn't, the author really didn't do a good job of explaining how that was an issue, because later on the pill becomes marketed to people to buy, and these women can't afford to have the pill, but you also use these women to get the pill started in the first place. And I feel like there should have been more talk about this as a criticism rather than just skimming over, oh, there's the pill, the pill, the pill.
So now we're going to talk about some of the praises of the book. So we like the fact that since it was the history of the pill, it had a bunch of historical facts as well as letters from mothers or families who emailed Sanger to just let her know that they kind of support her idea of going along with this magical pill, because some of these mothers had like 11 kids and like were actually going to die if they get pregnant again, and their husbands wanted to keep having sex and they were at risk of getting pregnant. So it was very interesting to read all that.
Well, I'll be getting into the social stigma behind the use of contraceptives. So back when the pill was formulated, there was a huge following of people and society that believed that the use of contraceptives was unnatural as it affected the menstrual cycle. And even now, as we've progressed as a society, this is still prevalent. There's a lot of backlash against birth control, and I just think it's interesting that even now, since so many different other forms of birth control have come out, there's still a huge backlash.
That I'm going to get with that, with the technological advancements with the birth control. In the beginning, there were very little forms. There was a diaphragm, a normal condom, and then the pill. And then there was other ones, but there was risk of being hooked from that. But now there's so many. There's the implants, the IUDs, and now just going into history, we're seeing more and more advancements in this, and it's making it easier for women who can't always take a pill every day to be able to be safe, be able to have sex, and not worry about getting pregnant.
One thing that really struck me about the pill, about reading the book that we talked about in our discussions, was that in 1958, 1 year before FDA was allowed to approve, or asked to approve Envoy, 17 states still banned contraception in some form. And even if the laws were not always strictly enforced, 1958 was not that long ago. So it really it was crazy for me to realize that legally people were not allowed to have full autonomy over their contraceptive choices. And 1958, I mean, those are our parents, those are our grandparents. It really, that's history, but it was very recent. And I kind of felt how in some regard we're still facing this today, this restriction in our contraceptive choices, such as restrictions per state on abortion, and the possibility of insurance not paying for birth control depending on where you work.
My biggest praise for the book is the walkthrough to the sexual revolution, which started with Sigmund Freud, and it ended with. I'm so sorry. We ended with them talking about how sex can be for pleasure solely and not necessarily for reproduction. So it does a good transition between that, and we praise it for it.
And so our last criticism is how it educated us. So I don't know about the rest of my group, but I know for sure that I had no idea how the birth control started. I assumed that everybody was so happy when it came out, like women don't have to get pregnant if they don't want to. So this kind of opened my eyes to see how much stigma there was behind it, and how there really was a struggle to get this pill out, which is why I recommend reading the birth control book. It's a very good read.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our TED Talk, and shout out to Renee for letting us finish recording.